Welcome to Kaizen Time, part of the Blood, Sweat, and Business podcast, where we provide constant improvement to businesses through timely, actionable financial solutions. Do you want answers to your financial questions? Email us at bsp@kaizencpas.com. I'm your host, Mark Valesky. Now let's get started. Welcome to Kaizen Time. I am joined by Eden and Adam with our risk management team. How you doing, guys?
Doing pretty good.
Awesome.
Hey, so you guys do insurance. You know, that's no surprise. Any of our listeners probably know that by now. But I guess really the big question is, why is it important? And of course, you're always thinking hypothetically, well, you're protected, right? Mm-hmm. How much protection is that offering? Like specifically from a business standpoint, how is that, applicable? How much savings are they getting? How much are they investing in it? Give me some info.
So generally speaking, insurance helps you, recover from a catastrophe. Like the whole thing about insurance is trying to bring you back to where you were before that catastrophic event happened.
Preventing disruption, right? Because disruption disrupts your cash flow. It can really screw everything up, right?
Exactly, right. So, I mean, if we were to bring this to like a personal, experience, not personal, but like, let's say you have a car and you get into an accident. It's a total loss. Mm-hmm. The company is going to pay you, however much that car is worth, and then you can use those funds to buy a new car. That way, your life continues on as it were. I mean, and that idea repeats in all over the insurance industry. So with commercial, like if you have a BOP policy, business owners, you could have a coverage called business income expense.
Okay.
So let's say an event happens where you can no longer, continue to make money or conduct business because of a claim. Business income expense will replace that lost income as if you were to never had that claim.
So basically they say, hey, this is probably what you would have made during this time, and they just hand it over.
Right, and here's some extra expense coverage for you to rent a new building. Things like that, and get you back on your feet to start running your business again until we can, if there's a fire, for example, get back into your building or a brand new building.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah. Exactly.
A lot of businesses can't take on that risk, right? They can't take on a risk of not being able to make money for 6 months, 12 months. And like, also, what are you gonna do with your employees? You care about your employees. Mm-hmm. Those are important people to you. You're just gonna tell them, sorry, you don't have a job anymore because I didn't, get the right insurance. Mm-hmm. So those are the things that can kind of bring you back whole, like what Ian was saying.
Right.
So again, you have this disruption, but when people think of disruption, these things can last a long time, right? Okay. And then again, you have your employees, and then again, there's also your customers, your clients, right? That have also been disrupted, and that's, I guess, you don't really think about it until you experience it, or you have the realization that when it happens to someone else, you see it secondhand.
Yeah, and like you mentioned earlier, like depending on what company you have or what company you run, like things do change and coverages do differ, right? Mm-hmm. Think about insurance. There's so many coverages, so many different ways to present coverages to the individual company. So if you don't have the right coverage, you may be able to have those expenses covered that Ian was speaking of for a certain amount of time. And then they dry out if you didn't get the right coverage. Or you can have coverages that just last until you're back whole again. So just depending on the conversation you have with your insurance agent on what you want, those are really important things to discuss.
So let me have some examples. What's something that would happen to let's say an auto shop, restaurant, or anything like that?
Sure. So like the fire is the most common example I think to use, right? So if you have an auto shop and that
there are a lot of fires,
I would assume. with all those chemicals.
I wouldn't just assume.
Right. Well, I mean, in general, in the insurance industry, fire is pretty common. Like that's one of the main perils that it is insured against.
Okay.
Right. So if you have a fire, then obviously the fire is usually going to make it so you're not able to provide work to customers coming in. Because you can't provide work, you'll have protection, hopefully for your building. That you can, rebuild.
That they can rebuild it. Yep.
And then also the expense that you would have been taking in if you were running a full functioning auto service shop.
Okay.
Now the other flip side of things that we haven't talked about, right? That's like protecting your property, your income. The other side of things that's really important to think about, especially at owning a business, is your liability side, right? So how many stories have you heard about one company or one individual suing a company? It happens all the time. So
Really?
all the time, right? It's a very litigious world that we live in. I think we all know that, right? I think we all think about that person who burnt their lips on that Starbucks coffee, and I think they won that lawsuit, right?
Yeah.
So,
All right.
So if you have liability in place, let's talk about the auto repair shop. You need to have the right coverage in place. So let's say you are repairing someone's vehicle and you do it incorrectly and their engine blows up,
Okay.
right? They're going to come after you probably, which as they probably should. But then if you don't have insurance, you're going to have to take on that cost, and they're going to take you to the court. And the court costs alone, even if they lose, is going to be
still thousands. And then you're also talking about the amount of time,
tens
effort,
of
and energy
thousands, yes,
to battle
the
that
stress you
right?
have to deal with, right? And like the money that's coming out just to fight the person that's bringing that suit against you. So having general liability is going to pay for those court costs, and also if the customer wins that suit, it'll pay out for that customer's property damage to their vehicle that was because of your operations that you completed.
Well, and kind of getting back to the fire, I also want to add in the level of protection you get, because obviously your damage, there's the disruption to your employees, but specifically if you have client vehicles there, you're also paying for those, and
Correct,
vehicles aren't cheap either.
Yeah, you have to have proper coverage for a garage to make sure that you are protecting those vehicles. Right, so it's just not an off-the-shelf coverage necessarily. So a coverage for a garage is going to look a lot different than coverage for a restaurant.
Yeah.
Well, let's get into restaurants, because obviously restaurants, they're not dealing with a $20,000 to $50,000 vehicle that's just hanging up on a lift, right? So what does it kind of look like for them?
A little bit different, but the liability is still going to come into play big time, right? A lot of people coming in that restaurant, God forbid you don't mop the floor properly and they slip and fall. So like your general liability is going to come into play there.
There's a lot more people, a lot more foot traffic, right? Most people just go to an auto shop, they leave their car, and it's fine. So you don't have to worry about people, like client safety.
Someone chokes on your food, they sue you for it. Do you want protection, or do you want to have to fight that on your own?
It almost makes me think that we only want to serve applesauce, right? Nobody's choking, right?
Right. And then you're going to think about all of the inventory. A lot of restaurants, they don't run really profitable, right? They run basically, they have the inventory, and then they just pay out their employees. And if they have, like, COVID was a big issue, right? A lot of restaurants closed because they weren't able to stomach that. So if you lose all your inventory,
is that a restaurant pun?
Yeah.
Oh,
done,
I didn't
sir.
even.
Well
I didn't catch that.
That was
Wow.
great. That was great.
good.
So it all your inventory, all your goods, like those need to be protected as well. So let's say if a typical policy may not cover the stuff in your freezer if something were to happen and your equipment breaks down and all your food is spoiled. A typical policy may not cover that, but you may have the option to do that. So the decision always kind of comes to you as the owner. How much risk do you want to stomach? But being presented those options are always going to be important, I think.
Well, and then kind of getting back to it, and let me know if this is the kind of thing that is covered or not, or again, it's dependent on the policy. So let's say a freezer goes down, you lose all that food, it gets spoiled, and you lose the profitability of not being able to serve that, right? Let's say you're a steakhouse, right? You make steaks, all your steaks are now gone. You're going to lose.
Let me get my claims professional on the phone for that one.
Right. But that's the kind of thing. So is there that level of coverage too?
There can be. Okay. Yeah. If it's a covered claim, potentially. Yeah. But again, it really depends on the exact situation of why that freezer went out and everything
how
like
that
that.
claim happened.
Yeah. And those somebody will investigate that.
Exactly.
So was it a maintenance
right.
thing?
So it's hard to give you like when a very specific situation like that, because I don't know all of the things that happened. But there should be protection for situations that if you were to lose your food, you could be reimbursed for that.
So really, it's more a discussion that the owner would have with you guys.
Right.
And also it's a situation where they can kind of evaluate it for themselves. Like, hey, I have this older freezer. Is it something I need to invest in a new one?
Correct.
Or do I get insurance to cover it just in case? Because obviously those aren't cheap either, right?
No, they're not.
Right.
Correct.
All right. Well, actually, that's really good. Do you guys have any other examples that you guys feel is really relevant? I mean, I have an example too, and we've discussed this before. That I was there for one of the companies I worked at had a cybersecurity lapse, so we got hacked, and we were still trying to produce orders, right? Like we were still able to produce. We weren't nearly as efficient, right? But there was that lapse. Recently, we had some guys from Platinum Systems come in and talk about cybersecurity, and they were saying that a lot of companies do not actually recover even with the insurance, right? So they either are undercovered or didn't bounce back well enough because all of a sudden that lapse is so substantial.
Right.
So
I see.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're right. Like cybersecurity is such a brand new topic. You know, having that conversation with your broker is going to be really important to see if that's something because everything is, on the web now.
everything's getting connected. And it can be a major
Anyone
disruption.
can get a ransomware, right? I mean, everyone can be like, hey, I'm going to hold your data hostage until you pay me X amount of dollars. Without cybersecurity, that could ruin you, and you may not be able to, recover. Like on the similar side of things, like, with the insurance today, have we not mentioned something? I think it's important with the smaller companies. I think most restaurants, most auto body repair shops are going to understand the necessity for insurance. They may not know all the ins and outs of their coverages, and that's okay. If they have questions, they can always go to their broker. But the small companies, like the 1 or 2 man operations, sometimes don't think they need it.
Well, and I guess the other thing is they may not be aware of the things that they may need.
Right.
They may be thinking about their workers' comp. Right. They may be thinking about some general liability, in case a customer comes in and gets hurt.
Or they don't think because they work from home, or they work in a small office where I don't need this for any reason, but they have that one customer, that comes in and does, something happens. Or they gave them advice that is incorrect, and because of that incorrect advice, something happens to that customer and that customer sues them. There's coverage for that. So those are going to be important things in the world that we live in today to make sure you're fully protected. And usually those are not going to break the bank, those policies.
Yeah, that's kind of the nice thing about insurance in general, and especially for the kind of policies that you guys offer. They're not like these massive investments.
Depending on the company,
because
of course, but yeah.
And I mean, but you guys tailor it to their needs.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
Of course.
So I always find that really, really helpful. And I mean, as opposed to what it could cost them.
Or you don't want to have to use the insurance.
But it's nice.
You know what I mean?
But it's nice
when you have it,
yep.
and something happens.
That's why people don't love insurance, right? They're paying all this money and they're just like, why am I paying this? And then the minute they use it, it feels like, it's a stressor. I have to do all this work to file this claim. But at the end of the day,
and I'll say the same thing I've said to you guys, and I'm certain it was on another podcast. I don't love paying the tow truck driver, but when I need him, I'm glad he's there.
Exactly.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah. Well, perfect, guys. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.
You've been listening to Kaizen Time, part of the Blood, Sweat, and Business podcast. If you like what you heard, subscribe and leave a 5-star review. This podcast has been brought to you by Kaizen CPAs Plus Advisors, providing advisory and accounting services to help you grow your business. Learn more at kaizencpas.com or email us at bsb@kaizencpas.com.